Hey everyone, thanks for your support in 2024. We have a lot of cool stuff coming in 2025, and here are some of the things you can look forward to as we move into next year. In the lead up to The Mandalorian and Grogu in 2026, we'll be starting a full series rewatch of both The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett on exploring hyperspace lanes beginning in October. You can also expect a rewatch of Andor, and we will have reviews of every episode of Andor and the rest of the Skeleton Crew as those come out. Josie will be returning as we continue to rank every Star Wars thing released ever. Reviews of every episode of every Marvel Disney Plus show, including Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, The Eyes of Wakanda, Wonder Man, Ironheart, Daredevil Born Again, and Marvel Zombies, the day after each episode releases, will be available on Beware of Spoilers. We'll be having special event podcasts on 30-minute reviews for the Academy Awards, our 2024 year in review in early January, ranking all of Phase 5 of the MCU after Fantastic Four First Steps comes out, and our 10th anniversary special. Once we complete our rankings of all the Pokemon games on the backlog files, we'll be moving on to Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy. Over on the YouTube channel, you can join in for playthroughs of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Pokemon White, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts Recoded, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, Sonic Adventure 2, LEGO Racers 2, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, and SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Want to keep on top of all the new things we have coming? Subscribe at mwpnews.com, subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/@mwpnews, or subscribe to Beware of Spoilers, 30-minute reviews, exploring hyperspace lanes, and the backlog files on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thank you for your support. Good morning and welcome to the Backlog Files. I am Adam and I'm realizing I forgot my soda in the other room. So, what we're here to talk about today, I know it's been a while, is the upcoming Pokemon Presents presentation. That's what I was saying. I got up to get my soda. Excuse me. So, I think we're looking at a very weird situation. We talked about this a little bit last year, where we didn't have much to really talk about after, because we had ZA was announced, a lot of mobile stuff, a lot of what's the other word I'm looking for? A lot of mobile stuff, a lot of like in real life events, and trading card game stuff. So, what makes this year different? And I think the fundamental difference is this year it's been so long since we've had one of these presentations where we've had anything of substance come out of the Pokemon Company that going into 2026, I think they need to establish themselves a little bit better because 2026 is a marquee year for them. 2026 will be the 30th anniversary of Pokemon Red and Blue. My predictions that I'm going to say today are a long shot. I'm going to acknowledge that now. I think two of them are more long shot than the others. But we'll get into them. The first and most obvious thing, let's just get into this first. Obviously, they're going to be talking about in real life events. The next World Championship, how the last World Championship went, all that stuff. They do that every year. They're always going to talk about that. So, they're always going to do that. There's also going to be mobile talk, because the mobile games tend to be very lucrative for them. On top of Pokemon Masters EX and Pokemon Sleep and Pokemon Go, now they have trading card game Pocket. So there's plenty of opportunities for them to talk about that kind of stuff. And usually this is where they kind of talk about, like, here's what we're doing in Go this year. Here's this year's World Tour, which is based in Unova. And then there's what's this year's, Go Fest focus going to be. And, they're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about new events in Sleep, new events in Cafe Shuffle, whatever the new set's going to be in the trading card game Pocket, all that stuff. All is going to get talked about a little bit. I would assume we get some announcements about the anime. We've been tending to get those more recently, since the anime has taken on this new form where it's not following Ash, it's following this new. I haven't watched any of it, but because the anime is in this new form, that's, I would anticipate them talking about that. All of that said, You're going to notice I talked about Go, talking about Unova. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the first thing we're going to get announced. The first big thing that we're going to get is more announcement about ZA. ZA is going to be their marquee title for the year, I think. And I think it's going to come out earlier, sooner rather than later. I think we're looking at a June release for the Switch 2. This game comes out in April or May. They're not going to do a prolonged hype cycle. They're not going to push this to November. And we'll talk about why in a minute. I think not only that, but we get confirmation of who the starters are. We get some gameplay footage. We get some idea of what this world's going to be. Maybe some story details. And then what deviations from the main gameplay do we have for this spin-off title? How does this deviate from Scarlet and Violet? How does this deviate from Legends Arceus? And then we get some Colossean forms. What do the Pokemon of Kalos look like? The alternate evolutions of past starters. I feel like we're gonna get that again. Whoever the starters are gonna have alternate final forms. Based on Kalos. I think there should be a few other Kalos Pokemon or Kalosian forms for existing Pokemon who end up here too, which could lead to some interesting things. And let's see how that kind of works. Now, all of that said, that's the early in the year thing. And that's going to be Switch 1 exclusive. And we talked about this a little bit when they announced the Switch 2, that I think this game is going to be Switch 1. I don't think Nintendo wants Pokemon saying that they're going out there and talking about the first title for the Switch 2 to this degree. Like, they're going to want to be the ones out front with that. So I think the 2 titles we get this year are Switch titles, and then next year we get into Switch 2 titles. Now, I think we're not going to get too much more on that here. I think we're going to get a good amount. Maybe if there's a new Eevee form, we get information about that here. All of that said, there's going to be not a ton, really. Like, there's going to be a good information, but I think they're going to do, we're going to get monthly drip feeds until the game comes out. I would say May or June. I think it comes out, or April or May, maybe June the latest if the Switch 2 comes out in June. They may say it'll be enhanced graphics on the Switch 2, but don't expect the game to be too much better on the Switch 2, I would say. Because again, I don't think Nintendo wants the first game to be shown off to be this, especially coming off of what Scarlet and Violet was. They don't want Pokemon going out there and giving the first in-depth look at what a Switch 2 game is, if they can't guarantee it's going to be that. If it is on Switch 2, and that is what this is, I think it speaks highly to the game. I can't guarantee that's going to be the case, though. Now, I don't think that's the only announcement we get this year. I think there's one more Switch game coming. And that will be announced in this presentation, too. Now, I'm on the fence about what I think this game is going to be. I think what this game is going to be is either a remake of Black and White, which I think a remake you don't have to put in as much into the hype cycle for. You can just kind of dump it out, and people will be like, oh, it's Black and White remade. It's either going to be that, or it's going to be a new, either a new Mystery Dungeon or a DX version of Sky, Explorers of Sky. I think Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, the directors of that, sold very well for them. I think they're very happy with that. I think they're going to want more of it. And the better version of that game is Explorers of Sky and Darkness. If you fix some of the things that I point out that I didn't like about them. And then if that's going to be the case, then maybe we get that as this year's, the late game. That said, I think that, looking at everything else coming up Unova this year, everything's coming up Unova. Pokemon Go has Unova. We just saw Unova briefly, but it was there. The Blueberry Academy in Scarlet and Violet is Unova. It's weird they're skipping over Unova in Remakes, and for Legends ZA, they're going right to that. And meanwhile, it's when we look at what happened with, when they made the first Legends game, that was tied very clearly to, what's it called? That was tied very clearly to, Sinnoh. and Sinnoh was the remake they released a few months earlier. I think that based on where Kalos is in this story, I don't think you can really just, have enough of a difference. This feels more like Legend ZA feels like a third version of X and Y from what we've heard kind of anecdotally so far. So I don't know if you really want to re-release X and Y if you're just going to do this anyway. It's a weird situation. So if you're gonna do this, you do that at the end of the year, and then you just kind of round out that, and you don't skip over that. Now, I don't think we get Black and White and Black and White 2. I think we just get Black and White. It's a odd way to do it, but I think that Nintendo and Pokemon Company have shown themselves to not 100% make the best decisions. Um, but regardless, I think that's kind of where we're gonna end up going. That's the second game I think they're gonna announce. And if it is Black and White, I think there is an avenue where it works with the same team that did, um, you know, I think a lot of the criticisms that get leveled at the team that did Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are not necessarily criticisms that apply specifically to their version of the game. Like, I think they're criticisms that apply to Gen 4 in general. So the idea, like, oh, the game is slow, oh, there's this, like, a lot of those problems were present in the original game as well. So I don't think Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are necessarily, like, I don't think it's a worse remake than it should have been. So I think if they go back and do Black and White, I feel like that could work. Especially considering the amount of time they've had, since we're now 3 years out from Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. So if they were working on it all this time, after the patches, obviously, and all that, then I think that it could work. Or they could just consolidate it in and have both games on one cartridge, which is also a possibility. Where it's like Black and Black 2, White and White 2 on one cartridge. Either way, that's going to be, that's a possibility. Or they do DLC, which I don't think DLC would necessarily work. I think you'd have to do one and the other. In the same way they did for, like the other collection games that you've had. Which actually brings me to number 3. I think a year from Thursday, a year after the release of this presentation, let's talk about the fact that Nintendo Switch Online. That let's start there. Nintendo Switch Online and the expansion have not had any of the mainline Pokemon games yet. They've had a good amount of the spin-offs. Red Rescue Team is on there. Pinball, I think, is on there. Maybe not Pinball. Red Rescue Team is definitely on there. Puzzle Challenge is on there. Puzzle League is on there. Trading Card Game is on there. None of the mainline games, though. And I think the reason for that is a lack of compatibility with Bank. I think the reason it took them so long to release it on the 3DS when they did that close to 10 years ago at this point, it was because they had to figure out a way to be able to make those Pokemon transfer out your Pokemon from Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal into Bank, so that way you can bring them over, into the main games. They didn't want to make it where you were unable to bring those Pokemon over, and I feel like that's kind of the thought process they have now. With Bank, being what it is, I don't know if Bank can communicate with games that are on the Nintendo Switch Online Pass. I don't think, based on the interface for Nintendo Switch Online and the online expansion, it doesn't appear possible. So all of that said, I think there's a chance that the reason why it's not out yet is because there's no way to do it. So how do you do that? You release them standalone. Now, I think that there's a good chance they do a collection. And I think if they're doing a collection, the way to do it is not just to bundle them all together and charge $60 for all the games. I feel like, yes, I would definitely buy it if they released, like, Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, all on one cartridge for the Switch or the Switch 2. Definitely would buy it. I still feel like, yeah, but what was the incentive here? Because I still have my cartridges. Like, what's going to incentivize me, the person who still has my Game Boy, the person who still has and can transfer it up all the way. You can still do that. You transfer it from, Ruby and Sapphire and all of them. You transfer them to Diamond and Pearl. You transfer them to, I think you could still transfer them to Gen 5. Then you transfer them to Gen 6, and then so on and so forth. I think you could still do that. What's the incentive then for someone to go out and buy this? I think HD 2D. And this is a bold prediction I get. Just like the last one was a little bit of a bold prediction. I think the HD 2D model, the HD 2D model is more of a way forward in this than you would think. It wouldn't be a full remake because you don't have to really ground up remake any assets in the way that you would if you were to make Let's Go Johto or Let's Go Hoenn or any of that. It's you have the assets already. You would need artists and all. I'm not trying to minimize the amount of effort it would take, but I think it's less effort to do that than it is to do a ground up remake. Because you have the general idea. It's just taking what is already there and moving it into a 3D space. And I think that's work, but I think it's also something that would incentivize someone to pay top dollar for that. And I think that is how you kick off the 30th anniversary. On the day of the 30th anniversary, which will be February 27th, 2026, you release the HD 2D version of those games. And I think the issue then kind of becomes like, well, what's the point here besides, like, it's a weird situation, to be honest. Because on the one hand, if it's just about the Pokemon, then you have Let's Go. If it's about the being able to experience these games, then you probably just want to port it. If it's not about either of those things, then the HD 2D remake, and then you just get back into the same circular reasoning. Like, where are we going with this? And I think the HD 2D is a way to homage the past, make updates where need be, and then also let it go. Because if you do an HD 2D remake of all of these games, you can bring them in line with where the series is in the present in a way that you can't if you're doing a direct port. Like if you're doing a direct port of Red, Blue, and Yellow, and I'm playing Red, Blue, or Yellow, and Pikachu has static, I'm gonna be like, that's a little weird. Or like you fix the typing, or you fix any of that, it could be like, oh, that's a little bit weird. If you do HD 2D and you add in pre-evolutions, you add in breeding, you add in all that stuff, this could feel like the definitive version of that game. Like with everything we now know, this is the version of that game we would have made back then. So even if you just do Gen 1, and even if you do Gen 2 as well, that would be a very interesting way to handle it. And I think that could be a really cool way to kind of tell this story. Even if it was like, okay, we're gonna do a light story. Like, again, I think we're looking at a very long gap between games, and I want to say the Pokemon Company has learned their lesson, but I don't think they have. I think they've been working on more than they've been saying, and I think they've been doing that with the intent that there will be more stuff coming down the line than we anticipate. But then, how do you wrap up the 30th anniversary year? Because that is a marquee year. Like the 30th anniversary is a marquee year, and you've done a lot. How do you do that? Gen 10. Generation 10 is coming out next year. Next November, back to the November release date. Whatever it's going to be. The next mainline games are coming out next November. We're going to get a first look at them tomorrow. A very brief look, but a first look nonetheless. Oh, and by the way, with the whole thing with the HD 2D, it doesn't have to be the Pokemon Company doing it. They can outsource that to another studio. Like that is something that is very, possible. Just that way they don't have to, do the, you know, like Gen 10 is going to be the Pokemon Company doing it. I think we get a look at starters, we get a look at region, and that's all we hear about until sometime in the future. It's going to be like anytime we get these at the very end, we get this very brief look at like what's this going to look like. We got that when Scarlet and Violet was announced, we had that weird like homage to all the President's Men. Like that is going to be the kind of thing we get. And it's going to be like, Generation 10 is coming in 2026. We're going back to November, and then we'll be good. And that, I think, is going to do a lot to really get people on board. And there's going to be an announcement of some kind of big feature to be like, oh, that's going to be it. And that's going to be a Switch 2 game. What the big feature is going to be, I think, is either multiple regions. We're either going to have multiple regions in that game, or, and one of the regions is going to be a returning region. It's not going to be like, oh, and here's 2 brand new regions. Like, no, it's going to be a returning region is going to be in the game, and not just a returning region. Maybe they go back to Johto. Maybe they go back to Kanto. You know, maybe that, like, hopefully not Kanto. I'm tired of that. Unless they go like future Kanto, where it's not just kind of the same thing over and over again. Maybe it is both. But that's gonna be one thing, and the other thing is every Pokemon will be able to be in the game. It'll be the return of the full true national decks. Those are my predictions. And just to summarize one more time, we get more stuff about ZA that comes early in this year. Before the midway point of this year, we get ZA. We get an announcement of a late game this year, probably also outsourced, probably a remake. We get an announcement of and that could also be a remaster of Pokemon Colosseum, Pokemon XD. There's plenty that could be done there. But that's the November release this year. A year from the announcement, we get the remakes of the original games, and then at the end of the year, we get Gen 10 in 2026. Do you think I'm stupid? Probably. Go ahead and leave a comment. But until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.